Everyone told him he was wrong. He agreed with all of them. And then he did it anyway. There was a moment in 1838 when Ralph Waldo Emerson stood in front of the graduating class at Harvard Divinity School and said something so offensive to the establishment that Harvard banned him from speaking there for the next 30 years. He wasn't throwing punches, he wasn't angry, he was calm, certain, almost cheerful about it. And what he said that day still makes people uncomfortable for the same reason it did back then. Because it asks you to trust someone. Most people never fully trust yourself. Think about the last time you had a strong opinion about something. A real one, not a borrowed one. How long did it take before you started looking around to see if anyone else agreed? How long before you softened it, qualified it, made it a little more acceptable? We all do this. We check, we adjust. We sand down the edges of what we actually think until it fits comfortably into what the room expects. Emerson watched people do this his entire life, and it bothered him deeply. Not because he was arrogant, because he thought it was a waste. A tragic, invisible, daily waste of something that could never be recovered. He grew up in Boston in the early 1800s. His father died when he was 8. His family struggled. He made it to Harvard on a scholarship, became a minister, lost his first wife to tuberculosis after barely a year of marriage. And then one morning he walked into his church, stood at the pulpit, and told his congregation he couldn't give communion anymore. Not because he didn't believe in God, because he felt like he was performing a ritual. He no longer felt anything and he refused to keep doing things he didn't believe just because everyone expected him to. That decision cost him his career. He didn't care. Pay attention to what he actually said in his writing, because most people summarize it badly. They turn it into a motivational poster. Trust yourself. Believe in yourself. You can do it. That's not what he was saying at all. He was saying something harder. He wrote that a man must learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within. His own thought. Not borrowed. Not approved by committee. Not validated by experts. His, and he said that most people dismiss exactly those thoughts the moment they appear. Because they realize no one else has said them yet. That's the trap. Not that we're stupid. Not that we're lazy. But that we've learned to treat our own thinking as suspicious until proven legitimate by someone outside us. Here's a real example from his life that most people don't know about. After he left the church, he started lecturing. He'd travel from town to town, speaking to whoever would show up, charging a small admission. No institution behind him. No official title anymore. Just ideas. A lot of his contemporaries thought this was embarrassing. Lecturing was considered a lesser thing, not serious scholarship. He did it anyway for decades. And those lectures became some of the most influential thinking in American history. The essays he is famous for started as talks in rooms full of farmers and merchants and curious strangers. He built the whole thing from scratch, on his own terms, and the only reason it worked is because he stopped asking permission to think what he thought. This is where it gets genuinely strange. Because Emerson wasn't telling people to be stubborn. He wasn't saying ignore all feedback. Never learn from anyone. Go it alone, no matter what. He said something more precise than that. He said that when you read a great book and feel moved by it, what you're actually encountering is your own thinking coming back to you from a different direction. That the reason great ideas resonate is because they confirm something you already knew but hadn't yet articulated. Think about that for a second. Every time you've read something and thought, yes, exactly, that's it, you weren't being educated. You were being recognized. Something in the writing matched something already in you. Emerson believed that most people had far more original thought inside them than they ever gave themselves credit for. and that the great failure of his era, and honestly every era, was how thoroughly people talked themselves out of their own minds before anyone else got the chance to. The word he used was conformity, and he hated it with a precision that's worth understanding. He wasn't talking about wearing the same clothes as other people or liking the same music. He was talking about intellectual conformity, the habit of outsourcing your judgment, of looking at what the smart people think and then thinking that, of reading the consensus and adopting it, of smoothing over the moments where your real reaction differs from the expected one. He called this a slow suicide of the self. Now look at your own life for a moment. You have an idea at work. Before you say it out loud, you run it through a quick internal filter. Is this too weird? Will they think I'm being difficult? Has someone smarter already said this and concluded it doesn't work? By the time you open your mouth, the idea has already been managed, pre-rejected, made safe, and the version that comes out is maybe 30% of the thing that started. You do this with beliefs too. Political ones, spiritual ones, opinions about your own life and what you want from it. There's the version you hold privately and the version you're willing to defend publicly. And the gap between them is exactly the size of your self-reliance problem. Emerson wasn't describing a character flaw. He was describing a learned reflex. You learned to distrust yourself by being corrected enough times, by watching what happened to people who said the wrong thing or went the wrong direction. You got smart about it. You started pre-correcting before anyone else had to. And now it feels like wisdom. It feels like humility. It feels like being reasonable. He would tell you it's none of those things. He would tell you it's fear wearing a very convincing costume. The shift he was pointing at is subtle, but it changes everything. It's not about being more confident or louder or more willing to fight for your opinions. It's about the moment before all of that. It's about whether you let yourself actually finish a thought before you start editing it for public consumption. Whether you trust that the thing forming in your mind is worth taking seriously before you know if anyone will agree with it. He wrote that society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. Not because society is evil, because society runs on agreement. And genuine thinking often begins in disagreement. And if you need society's approval before you'll commit to your own conclusions, you will never actually think. You'll just rearrange what's already been approved. His own life was the proof. Every time he followed the path laid out for him, minister, married, institutional, it broke. Every time he trusted the thing he actually believed, even when it had no external support, it grew into something real. The lectures, the essays, the friendships with people like Thoreau and Hawthorne, relationships that shaped American literature and philosophy permanently. All of it built on a very simple and very difficult practice. He finished his own thoughts. You don't have to be a philosopher to use this. Tonight, sometime before you sleep, think about one thing you actually believe that you've never said out loud. One opinion, one ambition, one conclusion about your own life that you've been quietly carrying and quietly ignoring because you're not sure it would land well. Don't share it yet. Just let yourself fully think it. Follow it to its actual end. See what's there. That's where Emerson starts. Not with confidence, not with courage, in the dramatic sense, just with the willingness to be alone in your own mind long enough to find out what you actually think. Most people never do this. Not because they're weak, but because they were never told it was necessary. They were told to learn more, get better advice, follow the experts, update their beliefs with new information. All fine things. But, underneath all of it, before any of it can be useful, there has to be a self doing the thinking. A person who trusts their own perception enough to actually use it. He spent his whole life saying one thing, in 10,000 different ways. You already have what you're looking for. Stop asking everyone else where it is. If that landed, the next video goes somewhere Emerson himself called the most dangerous part of this idea.